Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Grassroots Racer. This one is definitely an interesting one because you guys might remember I spoke to Taylor Gill, who was a rally driver. I think it was in the last year, and he went over and did the Rally Stars program in India, and he had an awesome time. But today we are going to speak to his co-driver, and he's done some pretty amazing things. Not only working with Taylor, he's been involved as a co-driver his whole life. His parents did it, his mum and dad, and we're going to hear his story today. So I welcome Daniel to the show.
So, Daniel, let's kick things off by getting into the roots of your racing journey. How did you find yourself getting into grassroots motorsport, and what fueled the initial passion?
Well, initially, it's like a lot of people involved with motorsport. Both of my parents were involved. They were both co-drivers in rally. So, yeah, way back in the day, in the 80s, they started. And then I come along just to interrupt everything. And I've been going to rallies since I was, a baby. So
That's awesome, man. And have you always been a co-driver, or did you ever do any driving in your younger days?
No, not in rallying. I haven't tried driving yet. I've done a few autocrosses and things like that. But I think it's probably best if I stick to the co-driver's seat. I think we might be in a bit of trouble if I try and get behind the wheel. So
That's fair enough. But obviously, for those who don't know, you are the co-driver for Taylor Gill. I've had him on here before. We had an awesome chat, and you're a part of the FIA Rally Stars program. So it's a pretty cool partnership that you two are involved in, and you're following the series around. Can you walk us through sort of the dynamics of a co-driver and the unique challenges that you've experienced, and what makes you and Taylor come together to find your success?
okay, well, there's probably a few questions in that, but
Yeah.
you are correct. I am involved with the Rally Star project with Taylor. I do co-drive for him. But before we got stuck into that, I met Taylor through the national series in Australia. And we did a few events together in 2022 and helped wrap up the Production Cup here in Australia for him, which no doubt he spoke to you about.
Yep.
So we did that last year for him, and then he was luckily selected to compete in the Australasian final of the Rally Star competition and managed to take it out. So yeah, he won this year's program that we've just competed in, and yeah, asked me after our success in 2022 to come along with him to move to Finland and compete in the 6 events we've just competed in. So luckily enough to get the call up. So
Yeah, and being invited, back to the rally program for 2024 is a pretty cool achievement. What sort of aspects of the program do you find the most exhilarating? Because obviously it's evolved. It probably evolved your approach to racing because, some people might say, oh, it's, rally can't be that different. But when you're in Finland compared to Australia, I guess it'd be very different. So how can you sort of see yourself evolving over next year? Or have you raced in Finland yet?
so we live in Finland, mate.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So last year we based ourselves from Finland. Obviously, we had 6 events all over Europe. So potentially we could have flown backwards and forwards, but we chose to try and make the most of the program. So we moved to Finland, and then competed in sort of six rounds this year. But yeah, following on to your question about how it's sort of evolved the co-driving, it's leaps and bounds. Taylor and I have both said that competing in this year's training season is sort of like we feel like we've done a rallying apprenticeship sort of thing. So I think before going, Taylor may have competed in 10 to 15 events, and I sort of competed in, say, 30, 35 events here in Australia. So, we somewhat had an idea of what we were doing, but definitely going over to Europe this year, we've definitely stepped up a level. And we know that by a number of factors, one, getting chosen to compete again next year, but also just coming back. Last week we competed in the final round of the ARC, and managed to come away with first production and fourth outright sort of thing. So, yeah, we can see in ourselves that level has definitely stepped up in since going to Europe. So,
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And what do you think when you're in Finland? Because that's quite well known for its snow. So yeah, how'd you sort of have that feel over there? And it probably would be a lot colder over there naturally than what it is here.
well, yeah, it is, mate. It's like anywhere in the world. It certainly has its four seasons. But yeah, definitely when we landed back in March, it was sort of getting to the end of their winter. But it's sort of, yeah, we landed, all the roads are covered in ice and it's minus 15 degrees. So it's very different to Australia. Obviously, the only snow we get is sort of in winter on top of the mountains sort of thing. So it definitely takes a little bit of adjusting, but like it's all part of the adventure sort of thing. Like it's super cool. So
I've got a bit of a different question for you. So one thing I've never understood about co-driving is I understand over crest, left, right, whatever, but I've never understood when they say 80 or 120. Is that how fast the suggested speed is, or is that what is that? I've never understood that.
okay, well, I'll try and keep it brief, obviously, because we have a limited amount of time. But basically, the numbers you are hearing could be one of two things. So basically, we want to know if we're going left or right, and then each corner has a gradient as well. And all teams use different sort of systems, but Taylor and I use a 1 to 10 system, meaning if you hear the number 10, it's a flat out corner in top gear, and if you hear the number 1, it's a sharp hairpin. So we need to be slowing right down, sort of thing. So those numbers you will hear a lot. And then in between each corner, there's obviously a distance to the next corner. So that could be 200 meters, that could be 20 meters. But again, that's very important, sort of thing. So if we're coming out of say a left 10, and we've only got 50 meters to the next corner, then he knows that he needs to be on the brake, slowing down for that next corner, potentially, depending on the gradient, sort of thing. So, yeah, it can be hard because sometimes you just listen and you hear all these numbers being flicked out left and right, and it can be hard to interpret sometimes.
So say you got a fast left-hand corner and then you're going into a sharp left 180 hairpin, right? So you would say to him, you'd say 6 gear, right? You'd go six flat, like, flat out, or you'd probably say flat out 10 left and say over crest, like left over crest 10 into, like, say 50 into sharp 1. Would that sort of be something you'd say, or?
Yeah, so obviously there's a billion different corners and interpretations and all that sort of thing. But say, for an example, if you've got a flat out corner, so you're barely lifting, but after that you have a sharp hairpin, potentially he may need to know that before that flat out corner that we have a sharp corner coming, because we are going so fast. So it's part of my job to not only do I have to read the notes, but I sort of have to be scanning ahead to see if there is a section in the notes where he does need to slow down. And then it's my job to judge when he needs to have that note. So if we're going slower, he doesn't, potentially need as much time. But if we are going flat out, then he might need to know before that fast left-hander that we have a sharp corner. So that's part of my job as well. So.
And I guess sort of you've worked with Taylor long enough now to know sort of what his tempo is, when he likes them. But obviously it comes with relationship building. How do you how does Taylor like it? Does he like them super early and then he memorizes it? Or does he like it sort of one corner ahead?
Taylor's pretty good. I have been with some other drivers that like me to repeat the note. So we'll be going down a straight and I will say the note once, and then as we get closer, they like me to repeat it. But Taylor's pretty good. He's concentrates very well and listens as well. So usually I find that I only have to say the note once. Like I say, it's up to me to sort of judge when I feel that he will need it. But the other thing is to, as you get quicker and quicker, you may not have time to repeat it. The corners are coming up so fast that's part of the driver's job. Not only do I have to give it to him in time, or potentially 1 or 2 corners ahead, he has to be able to remember that. So that's where things like your concentration and getting a good night's sleep and good diet and all that all comes into play. So
100%. And how do you guys go about preparing your notes? Because I sort of know that you can go on Recce's and you can even watch YouTube videos, to be honest, these days. But
yep.
What's the best approach to sort of gathering your notes, looking for bumps, looking for no shortcuts, looking for maybe potential rocks in the way? How can you sort of go about them things before ahead of time?
So there is a whole heap of different ways that you can get ready for a recce. Obviously, before each race, we need to do a recce because we need to set a notes. And again, every crew has a different way of approaching their recce. Lots of things go into it, but say, for instance, Taylor and I have a short list that reminds us what we need to keep an eye out for, what's important to us in our notes. And sometimes he'll just have a quick squiz of that, just as a bit of a mental reminder. And off we go, sort of thing. But also, when we're not at the rally doing a recce, we can also go out and just practice. We can just go in a normal road car and just off our own backs go and practice doing a recce. So that sort of sets us up when we get to the rallies and the recce is important and counts for the race. We've already been practice recceing beforehand, so we know what we need to do and what each other person needs or wants for that recce. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and I've got one question. So do race control warn you guys if anything changes between the recce and like a sort of a track hazard? Do you get a warning beforehand from race control?
Yes, we will. So obviously, it's sort of the rallying is set up a little bit different to like circuit racing and things like that. So we'll go out, say for example, we'll go out on the Thursday and the Friday and complete our recce to race Saturday, Sunday. So anything could have happened. That a storm could have gone through and some of the road might have washed away, or there might be some trees down or something like that. So the road is actually in a different condition than when we recce'd it. So we have some course cars that go out in front of us and we'll check the course to make sure that it is safe for us to come through on the Saturday, Sunday race day. And if there is something, some of the roads washed away or something, then we will get, before we start, we might get a bulletin. They might even tell us right at the start control, just before we're about to take off, that at this point in your notes, there's now a big washout in the road. Be careful, put a caution on it, sort of thing. And so, yeah, they will let us know.
So that's a pretty good thing then you've got, because I'm sure in the early days of rally, before sort of they could just communicate straight to your headset, it would have been quite tricky to sort of, learn them things. And because if you had a big washout or, a big storm the night before, you could have no idea what you're going to face.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously technology's changed a lot. So back in the day, though, those messages may have been relayed to us via UHF radio. So they've been around for a long time. Oh. But now, this day and age, we have all sorts of little computers, the Rally Safe unit inside the car. So if something happens on course, it'll warn us as we go along. And the same with the start control officials and stuff. They have tablets and good communication and connection to pass on any information that we need to know. So
yeah, that's really good. And just sort of circling back to the start of this, we were kind of saying about how you and Taylor have been working together for just over a year now, I'd say.
Yep.
So for a driver, it's really important on a circuit, for an example, it's really important that within the first 2 laps, they sort of learn the track if they've never been there before. As a co-driver, how do you sort of judge your main driver if you haven't had him before? Is there a few different ways you can quickly pick up on their driving style, the way they go about things? Can that sort of help determine how you read out your notes or how you even write them down?
Yeah, definitely. So if I'm jumping in with a new driver, obviously on a race weekend you're going away, so the time it takes you to travel to the event and that sort of thing, you're just getting to know them in general, sort of thing. And then as we do recce, um, we sort of say that there's no such thing as a right way to recce and a wrong way to recce. So a good set of notes or a bad set of notes, but there's definitely better. So you sort of get to know um, as you go along how much potential experience this new driver may have writing notes, whether they're completely competent and you can just trust that they know what they're doing, or potentially they might need a little bit of a helping hand. So we might start a recce and the driver sort of stops on one corner and goes, "Oh, I'm not really sure if it's a 6 or a 7." And then you just fall back on your experience and you might be able to help them along, sort of thing. So you're gauging the whole way, and just working together as a team, like a lot of motorsports. You just do the best you can and try and help each other along.
Yeah, that's good. Bit of a random
Yeah.
one. Have you ever had a main driver who doesn't speak the same language?
Uh, no, I haven't actually, but it's quite interesting going over to Europe, a place like Finland. Obviously, they speak Finnish, but their second language is definitely English. So I've met a few co-drivers over there that will actually call notes in a few different languages: Finnish, English, and so on. Which I take my hat off to them, because I think it's co-driving is quite a tricky job in one language, let alone several different languages. So for the moment, I'm happy with just doing it in English. So.
That's fair enough. It's definitely one of them things. Which you got to take a hat off to some of them guys because, to speak Finnish in English and potentially just sort of from, I notice a lot of Europeans, they know their language,
Yeah.
and sort of the countries around them, they have a base idea. So it's, that's a pretty cool thing. But looking back at what you've done so far, is there anything that you sort of, have you ever sat down and sort of realized like this is why I love to do this? Have you ever had any brilliant success which makes you sometimes think, this is why I got into this game?
Yeah, look, we've definitely won some races. Back in 2019, me and another driver managed to win a championship. So we wrapped up the Victorian State Rallying Championship. So that's always pretty cool. But definitely this year, like you find yourself in the middle of these tiny little European towns, in a cool little Rally 3 rally car, on top of a mountain, just thinking to yourself, how did I even end up here? You start at the club level in Victoria, in the middle of the night in the bush, and all of a sudden you're high on top of a mountain in the middle of Austria or something like that, and you just sort of have to pinch yourself and go like, yeah, this is pretty cool, and I'm very, very lucky.
That's honestly, fair enough. And how do you sort of go with the whole thing? Because you and Taylor, Aussies here from no, Australia, obviously, because you're Aussies. But how do you sort of go? Do you ever run into many Aussies overseas or any people who've lived here before?
So there are a couple of co-drivers from Australia that have been overseas and done certain aspects of what we're doing over there. So it's nice. They've certainly helped me along the way, and I've asked them for advice, sort of thing. Because definitely when I first headed over there, it's quite daunting, dealing with different languages and different foreign countries and that sort of thing. So they've been a big help. Not so much that I bumped into them over there, but they're always, more than happy to have a chat over the phone if I need some help or guidance along the way. So again, super grateful for those guys as well. So.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And it's co-driving, like any co-driver in general, I give my hats off to them. So I do a bit of, not rallying, but I do autocross, stuff like that, kind of crosses.
Yep.
I find that's pretty good because I know the tracks and I sort of know every layer that could be.
Yeah.
But I'd be definitely keen one day to get into a rally and have a proper crack at it. So and it'd be something you sort of need a co-driver for. So without them, you can't really go rallying.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said before, it's definitely a team sport, and I think that's what I like most about it. As much as I'm trusting him to keep us on the road, he's trusting me to make sure that he has the notes. Otherwise, he will go off the road, sort of thing. So, yeah, I can highly recommend it, mate. If you ever get a chance, even as you say, even just starting at a base level, definitely give it a go.
And what would you give any advice to someone who who sees themselves as a good map reader or good note reader, and but they love motorsport, but they don't feel like they could take on the driving role and would love to be a co-driver? What advice would you have for them?
Well, firstly, I would recommend it to anyone. I always make the joke, especially when people ask if I've ever driven in a rally and that I co-drive because it's a lot cheaper than driving. You don't have to own the car or anything like that. So, so it's a good way to get into rallying at a relatively cheap level. But yeah, any sort of advice, I would just say you definitely got to hook up with a car club, and yeah, just you sort of have to have. You have to be a little bit OCD. You have to really sort of what's the best way to put it? Yeah, you have to really want to do a good job and be precise in your work, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And have you sort of got anything left, that you want to achieve or you haven't done yet that you're still really keen on doing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I've been co-driving since 2016. It's all been in Australia up until this year, sorry. So I definitely feel like it's just sort of starting for me. I would love to turn this into a full-time job. At the moment, I still sort of have to do a little bit of other work here and there to pay rent and that sort of thing. But hopefully down the track, I can turn it into my full-time profession. But definitely just initially next year is full focus on the JWRC. So we want to go and take this as far as we can, represent Australia as well as we can. And yeah, see where we end up. Hopefully it's next year and years to come. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
That's awesome. And what about any certain events? Because for circuit racers like myself, you've always got Bathurst, Le Mans, Monaco, Indy 500. You've always got your events that you set on. Have you got any events that you're sort of set on that you'd love to do one day?
Well, yeah. So there's always bucket list stuff. I'd love to compete in a safari rally. I just there's something about the safari rally that really appeals to me. Going rallying is a big adventure. It always is, sort of thing. But safari rally is just that next step, sort of thing. So definitely a safari rally, and then going on from that, it's off-road rally, but Dakar. I'd love to do a Dakar at least once, sort of thing. So that's really cool.
No, it sounds like a plan. Dakar is a super awesome event, and you'd be lucky to compete in it, let alone finish. Those guys, it's such a hard task and rally to do. Hats off to Toby Price. He's amazing. I think he's won it twice in 2 different categories, if I'm right.
Yeah, he does it on bikes, and he does it in. I don't know if he does Dakar in the truck as well, but I know he certainly does Fink. He's famous for going down the Fink racetrack on a bike and then helicoptering back and then racing the truck, which is just incredible. But yeah, all that adventure behind it, So it's not always just about the fastest, but it's getting the car through without breaking it and all that sort of stuff. Really, really appeals to me.
Yeah, 100%. He is just a different breed. He can get on anything. He gets on motorbikes. He gets in cars. He gets in trucks. He just gets in whatever's thrown at him.
Yeah.
And I respect a driver like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely puts in the hard work.
Yeah, 100%. And, sort of what... Actually, have you talked to Taylor about this? What does he prefer? Front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive?
Well, I'm not sure if we've had this exact conversation, and I don't know how much experience he's got in a front wheel drive car. He was lucky enough. They sort of, I think he has a little bit of front wheel drive experience, but one of his first rally cars was the full drive GC8, which he probably discussed with you when you guys had a chat.
Yep.
So the majority of his racing's been in full drive cars, and I just about put money on it. He'd tell you full drive, just like the grip and the power out of corners and stuff. Like, you just can't beat it. Like, rear wheel drive skids is a lot of fun, and so are front wheel drive skids. But just for pace and grip and excitement, I think he would definitely say full drive, and I probably agree with you.
Well, the thing is, rear wheel drive, you can oversteer. Rear wheel drive's oversteer, and when you slide, you get off the throttle.
Yeah.
Front wheel drive, when you slide, you get on the throttle. All wheel drive, you pray. That's all I know.
Yeah, well, if it's front wheel drive and I'm driving, you just panic and jump off the brakes and understeer straight off the corner. So that's again why I co-drive. So
yeah, so I had a Subaru. It wasn't all-wheel drive. It was only rear-wheel drive because I'm a junior, so I can't run it all-wheel drive. That was a lot of fun. That's the only sort of rallying I've done in rear-wheel drive. So my circuit cars are rear-wheel drive, but I've had a Focus, a Getz. They're front-wheel drive. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah. Look, just racing in general, I don't think it matters. Like, the same thing, you asked if I've driven. I've done autocrosses in little front-wheel drive cars, little $500 paddock bombs and stuff, and it's just as much fun as anything you could do. So
yeah, the only issue is it's sad when you got to say goodbye when they eventually blow up.
Oh well, yeah, but that's life. That's racing, isn't it? So at least it's relatively cheap at the moment for you.
Yeah. Well, the Getz was really good. It just done the coil pack.
Yeah.
So that's fair enough. And it was sort of the time came for it. Then we got the Subaru. Yeah. Subaru was good. It just wasn't fast enough because I wasn't allowed to run it front wheel drive. So then I bought the Focus, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll do rallies in the Focus, but I'm going to take that to Winton. You know, get a few laps under it, and then I blew it up. So
yeah, well, that's all right, mate. As you go along and climb up the ladder, it'll just get more and more expensive. So that's what you've got to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, without the support of these guys, you don't go and do it. So
100%.
Have you got anyone you'd like to thank for supporting you along the way, and sponsors, people, anyone?
Well, definitely, of course, all my friends and family. Like, they're always 100% behind me, and especially when you're overseas, it really makes a difference. Just the smallest little Facebook message, you might be reading it on the way out to a stage. It really does help when you're on the other side of the world. And I know Taylor's got a couple of sponsors back here, Shannon's Insurance and Shamrock Haulage, so they helped us out a lot this year. But other than that, just thanks to Taylor for giving me the opportunity too. So
he was a really good kid, and I love speaking to him, and it is an awesome talent. Behind the wheel, he can virtually jump into anything as well, I reckon. Because that's what they sort of test you in at the program he did. So I think he's done really well, and I wish the best for him and you in the future when you go back overseas next year in Europe, and give it your best shot.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, and sort of remember, anyone who's racing this week, drive fast and take chances. Safely, of course. Thank you so much, Daniel. I really do appreciate you jumping on.
No problem, mate. Thanks for having me.
It's all good.